Hello and welcome to a special episode of the J. Turner Research Multifamily Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Mindy Price, and today we are proud to sit down with Clay Hicks and Aryne Bailey from the Dinerstein Companies of Houston, Texas, the 2022 top-ranked student housing company in our annual Student Housing Power Rankings. Welcome, Clay and Aryne.
Thanks
for having us.
That's exciting just to hear you say that out loud.
Yeah,
I know. Like,
very exciting.
Literally, you've done it 5 years in a row.
We can't believe it. It's incredible.
It is incredible. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that here in a little bit. But for our audience that doesn't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves? We'll start with Clay.
All right. My name's Clay Hicks, and I'm president of our management company at the Dinerstein Companies. I've been here about 8 years now. We've grown substantially over those last 8 years. We're primarily half student housing, half conventional, and Aryne is our vice president of student housing. So she's really the key to a lot of this success that we've had over the last 4 years. So, 5 years running now. So excited for her to be here and share everything that we've done.
So with that, we know it's you. Come on, now tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like Clay said, I'm Aryne Bailey. I'm our Vice President of Student Housing. I've worked in the student industry for almost the last 15 years, and I joined Dinerstein about 5 years ago. So coincidence? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe a little bit. But happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to be here or to have you here. So for those that don't know, I would love for them to hear a little bit about the history of the Dinerstein Companies. Clay, do you mind sharing a little with us?
Sure. I actually learned a lot this morning. I'm going to pull out a few notes. I called Jack Dinerstein on my way in this morning just to get him to tell me kind of the original story, because working here, you kind of hear bits and pieces, but I've never just sat down, and should probably do better at learning more about the history, but and had him tell me the story. It's a pretty cool story of how it just kind of came about and how things came together based on what was happening in the markets, but also him and his own life. It started with, he was talking to a friend who was saying his son was going to Baylor and couldn't find any apartment to live at Baylor. And he was like, Jack's like, there's no way that's possible. He said, yeah, we literally can't find anything. So they went up there and kind of looked around. And at the same time, Jack's son, Brian Dinerstein, who's now our CEO, president, was going to school at Vanderbilt, and they were having the same issue with finding apartments. And so around that time, JPI had just kind of built one buy-the-bed deal, and they went and toured it and saw, kind of what was happening. And the light bulb went off to Jack as he was sending his son, was this whole lease by the bed, and you have this and you can have a guarantor that makes you only liable for your bed and not worried about all the other roommates and if they're going to pay or not. Because, as a parent, which I'm learning now as a daughter that's about to be incoming freshman at A&M, like, you want to just be focused on your own and not worried about if your roommates are going to pay or not, and then who's liable for the unit. So that's where Jack was saying that was really going to be what they were going to push hard on. And so they went out and did their first 4 deals. They did one at Texas A&M, one at Baylor, because they're a friend, one at Texas State, back then it was Southwest Texas, and then a deal in Boulder, Colorado, which I'm not sure why that one got thrown in. So that was their original 4 deals. And so they had this criteria as they were doing deals, is they wanted to be a school that was over 10,000 units, and they wanted the property to be on the bus line. That was like their first 2 criteria, which kind of makes sense. Yeah. And he said, look, it had never been done, so we were just kind of learning trial by fire. And he kept saying that over and over. He goes, we just kept trying things, and we learned the hard way. And so a couple examples he gave were, they first started with 4-bedroom, 2-bath, because they're like, we just need to get the price down as low as possible per unit. We need the 4-bedroom, 2-bath. So they did that in their first 4 deals. Then realized the most important thing is these kids wanting to have their own bath. So after that, they started doing these 4-4s and 2-2s, and they tried to do some 3-3s, and they realized that odd numbers of students in a apartment don't really work because then there's always one odd man out. So this is the stuff they're learning
trial
like
and
that.
error.
Right. And then one other thing that he said that I thought was interesting is like, so they realized you got to furnish them. And so they just started furnishing with off-the-rack furniture. Well, off-the-rack furniture does not work for student housing. So they walked in and the beds were broken, couches were beat up and stained and everything. So they're like, so they said, we got to go design our own. So they found a furniture company and started building steel frame beds that weren't going to break. They started doing couches with slip covers. So at turn, all they did was just pull the slip cover off and put a new slip cover on for all the stains and cigarette burns and stuff like that. They said it was just learning the hard way over and over and over. And they built this huge business of 20, 30 properties and then ended up selling it. And so it was like a super neat success story. But I thought what was interesting is it all kind of happened like his son was going to college and they realized the need. And then here we are now, building some of the nicest student high rises right across from campus. Some of the criteria still stays the same. We try to be at tier 1 universities, but if bus line's great for us, we would rather be walkable because you can't replace that. So that's been one of our big things. One other thing I wanted to mention lastly before we move on is, so one of their first deals that they did, like I said, was at A&M. And the year they opened, ironically, I was at A&M and I lived there for a summer with some of my teammates from the football team were there, and I needed to be there just to like work out for the summer. And so they were like, hey, you can bunk up with us. And I don't know if I should tell this story or not.
Oh, yes, you should tell this story, 100%. This isn't being recorded. Tell me more.
Yeah. So they were like, hey, we have an extra bedroom, but it's locked. We just got to figure out how to unlock that bedroom, and you can stay in it for the summer. And so I won't say how we figured it out, but we figured out how to unlock the bedroom, which, Aryne, you know about locking those bedrooms off. And so I guess illegally stayed in the Dinerstein's first Sterling deal at A&M in a locked bedroom, and it just had furniture. And I remember I just brought a sleeping bag. As a college kid, you just bring a sleeping bag and toiletries and lived in a bedroom that wasn't supposed to be used. And I told that story to the Dinerstein family like 5 years ago, and they I think they created like a fake invoice for like rent that was owed. Yeah, that was owed for those 3 months. So anyway, it's kind of funny how it's like full circle that I crashed in their original deal, and now we're here talking about it.
Aryne, do you put new locks in and have Clay go and see?
I'm not going to anymore. He's obviously not going to be much out.
But I can test him. I can break.
No, he's your tester.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, see if you can break him.
If this gig doesn't work out, you can go to a lock company, in our industry and be like, hey, so let's see if it passes the Clay test.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. So, okay. I just can't get that vision out of my head. Like, gosh, proud parents from all this stuff, of course. And the fact that you're working here now,
My parents don't know that story.
They will now. So
They'll be so proud. My dad's, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. So there is a big difference that some really don't realize from student housing and conventional housing. I actually did not realize how big of a difference there was on the operations side, because Clay and I go way back to our old Gray Star days. All I did was work on the conventional side. And so when I came over to J. Turner Research a little over 10 years ago, and being such a huge provider for what we do for student housing, for the survey program that we have, I thought, oh, I've got this. Like, this is easy. I'll walk in and know everybody. That was number one. Number two is I'll understand the language. I'll understand the timelines. The budgets have to be the same. Like, it's all the same. And Clay, I have to tell you, you know me. I pivot well in awkward situations, but it was one of those moments where I had to sit back and go, oh no, we're going to school. We're going to figure this out, because it was very different for me. And I've learned a lot over the last 10 years, but that's my experience being on the supplier partner side. I'm curious to know from your perspective transitioning over, and then I'd love to hear yours as well, Aryne, tell us what you learned and what the differences are. And did you have an experience like I did?
Yeah, let me tee it up for Aryne. She's the expert still. But right, when I came here, I was at Graystar for 10 years, and obviously here in Houston was all conventional. And so coming over to be president of Dinerstein, I'm like, look, multifamily rental is the same. They're just younger, right? Like I can walk in and do this. Boy, was I wrong. And you walk in and like it just hits you in the face. Like coming from conventional to student housing, it's so fast paced. It's stressful. It's you have to like make decisions like on the spot, and like you feel this stress of like every day is one less day that you have to lease that property up, because if you're not leased up, you're not getting leased up. And so like everything is so quick. In conventional you can try a few different things and see what works. There's no trying. Like if you make an error, it could be for an entire year. And so same way, like just trying to dig in and figure it out. You also figure out that there's people like Aryne that like thrive in it and they love it, and they would be bored out of their mind on the conventional side because they get that adrenaline rush from like the nonstop chaos of student housing, of just always in lease up and dealing with the crazy students. And I can say it now that I'm one of them, the crazy parents. I mean, you think about these. Yeah, right. Well, yeah, you have one in college right now. And how different does it make you look? I always tell them now, like, I'll talk to Aryne. I said, I actually look at this situation very differently now, being a parent, than I did before, and having a lot more sympathy for what the parents are going through of like, you just did it. I'm about to sending my baby to college and like handing her over to people that you don't know. And I'm like, you better take care of her or I'm going to come after you, and now you get it and how they are. And so that's where Aryne and her team does so well on knowing how to balance, both the parent and the student. On conventional, you're just going after, just the one resident. You don't have that on the student side. You're having to market to both the parent and the student. I mean, there's so many differences that you really have to learn. And I think it's why, there's a core group of student housing operators that are really, really good. And there's a lot of people that like see it and they're like, oh, that's great, I'm going to go try it. And then they're gone in 2 years because they're like, I can't do this, I'm out. And actually people I've talked to, they're saying, we're going to leave that to the professionals. You guys know what you're doing. Y'all do it. And I think that's why you see on your rankings, there's clusters of groups that are really, really good at it. So anyway, sorry, I'll send it over to the professional to tell you kind of her thoughts on differences. But it's very, very different if you don't know what you're doing.
I think it's funny you say that as a parent. So when I started in the industry, I was fresh out of college. Similar situation to many recent college graduates, had, no idea what I was going to do and just kind of fell into the industry. And so my perspective from 15 years ago is completely different now that I'm a parent. And it just changes. It's just kind of changed the way even I look at things now, having kind of grown up in the industry. But to Clay's point, I mean, I think number one, the student industry takes a certain type of person. To your point, you have to be able to thrive in chaos. You have to love it. If you don't, then it'll eat you alive. There's just no way that you're going to survive, because we're constantly restabilizing deals. And I think that's the big difference. Everything stems from that. On a conventional deal, you go through your initial lease up, and once you stabilize, you just have to maintain that. Now, there may be things or cyclical changes, things like that happen, but on a student deal, it's every year. So you start from 0 and you have to get to 100 every single year. And one little thing that changes could completely throw off everything for your lease up, and then that dictates where you are for the next 12 months. So to Clay's point, if we make an error or we miss our window, if we miss the mark, then we've basically baked our occupancy and our income for 12 months, and that could be detrimental to any property. So I think it all kind of stems from there. We focus primarily on the academic calendar, so everything in student housing revolves around the university. So when classes start, that's when we have to be ready to house residents. When the university goes on fall break and spring break and summer break, we have to be prepared for those lulls. And then
The Greeks come in.
And then the Greeks come in, and then we have to be prepared for, depending in the market, we have to be prepared for the influx of the Greeks and the early admissions, during the summer. We also I think our just main difference is we only get 2 to 3 weeks to turn over our beds. And most of the time we're turning 60 to 70% of our property, whereas a conventional property is maybe turning over 10 units a month. And so you have this crazy chaotic 2 to 3 weeks where everybody's working. You've got tons of contracted vendors that are helping you prepare your property. And really for us, the biggest thing is if you miss that turn, if you don't have a successful move-in day, it completely just starts the resident experience. And if you miss that mark, then you've missed it for the year for that person.
Have you ever been to a student turn before?
I have not.
Oh.
So if you want to see chaos, if you want to get a piece of what student housing is about, you and Joseph and some of your team should come up for a team building. And drive up to one of our properties in College Station or San Marcos or Huntsville.
Oh, I love that idea.
And like give her just like a taste of what a 24 hours looks like on a student turn.
So I'll give you,
And when I say 24 hours, it's
24 hours.
I see the post on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I see the congratulations and what a big deal it is. And we hear about it through the surveys, what a big deal it is. But
So, 24 hours. I mean, that's an easy one. We have our move-out day. That's our big one. So move-out day is obviously big and the move-in day is big. But move-out day, that's going to set your experience for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Come move-out day, you have, like I said, 70% of the property is moving out. So if it's an 800-bed property, you're talking 550 people are leaving. You have 2 to 3 weeks. So we have to walk every single one of those bedrooms within 24 hours so that we know, okay, this unit needs a full paint. It needs a full carpet replacement. It needs, full furniture, whatever it is.
these 18-year-olds, their first year away from home.
Oh my gosh. Animals. And what's funny is
I'll have mom to clean up.
I know.
No. And we'll pre-walk units and do things, a month ahead of time. But in the college world, that can completely change. So you have to go through the entire property, make sure everything's ready, and then just get everyone set up for the next 3 weeks. And like I said, if you miss that 24-hour mark, your whole turn experience can be completely ruined. So it's
Because then you've been lining up vendors for 6 months probably to get them ready for this specific time.
And then getting them on their schedule, having them ready to go. You've got to have, your painters leading, your cleaners leading, your carpet. It's very, very organized. I mean, it's completely organized chaos, but it's very organized to make sure that you're hitting and then that you're also turning the right amount of units on a daily basis to make it to the end and to finish. So it's
Hoping, and like right now, hoping the furniture is going to be delivered in time because of supply chain issues
that everyone is experiencing. So, and then you have COVID that you throw into the mix, and you can have a entire staff that's wiped out because of COVID right now. And so there's so many just outlying factors that play such a role in your turn. But like I said, if you have a great turn, then you've set up the best resident experience that you can for that next year. But if you miss the mark, then it's really hard to recover from that, because right after move-in, we're asking that resident to renew their lease for the following 12 months. So you've got to really hit it in order to make sure that they want to live with you again.
I just got tired listening to you. And I am going to take you up on that. That would be so fun to do something with that. So I want to ask you a question about COVID. We're not going to spend a lot of time there, but I think our listeners will value what I'll ask. But for our listeners that don't know, every piece of terminology that you said through when you were explaining everything, I understood except for one. So if I didn't, and if I should, I'll be embarrassed, but I'll call myself out. The Greeks.
Oh, the Greeks. I'm sorry, I didn't even think to explain. So really it's Greek life at any university. So that's a major pull for most student housing properties. But the sororities and the fraternities, because they have rush, and rush normally starts before school starts.
Okay.
So they need to get in early. So for us, if it's a property that's primarily housing the sororities and the fraternities, we need to make sure that we're able to move them in so that they're settled by the time rush starts, so that they can then go through rush and then they'll start classes after that.
And sometimes your properties aren't ready to be open at that time. We're building a property at University of South Carolina right now, and it butts up to Greek Village, and so it's a huge draw for it. And so we have to make sure that our academic calendar and move in, move out calendar kind of lines up with the Greek Village and when they're moving in and out. There's so many that goes in. And one thing that made me think of when you were talking, Aryne, too, is you talk about every year you're doing it over again, and making sure that you're not falling into the trap of going off the assumption that last year is the same as this year. Mm-hmm. I did that at the beginning, just thinking, they're all kind of these academic calendars. There's so many little things that can completely change a market. COVID obviously, but it can enrollment. It can be a developer coming in and dropping in more units than should be. It can be the Greeks opening up. There's so many different things that can happen that you have to literally look at every single unit or every single year on its own, and not make the assumption, which would be easy, but it's not. It's sometimes exhausting trying to figure out. You're like, something has changed in this market that we need to adjust to. What is it?
Even the university just delaying sending out acceptance letters could be a huge change in any market, because if you're looking at your year over year numbers, maybe last year they sent it out in February, and so you saw your property fill up by the end of February. Well, if they're not planning on sending them out until the end of March this year, well, that will completely change your leasing cycle, and you have to pivot and adjust for that.
So how did you like adjusting to having student and conventional properties? You have student budgets that are probably going on right now, and then you have your conventional. Do you do them separately?
We do them separately, and I'll say from my standpoint, before Aryne, even when Aryne was here, we call our leaders within our company portfolio directors, because I look at them each running their own portfolio, and I had a handful of student portfolio directors and a handful of conventional portfolio directors, and I realized that I personally can't. They're so different. I can't focus on all. And that's when Aryne, credit to her, was, she was just kind of naturally taking a leadership role within our company on the student housing group. And you could see people going to her for questions. And that's when I was like, I need to lean on somebody. And so that's when we promoted Aryne to vice president of student housing. And I can just kind of let her, run that whole group, and let her, because she can focus on the budgets. She's our primary liaison to our student housing clients. And then I can focus more on big picture stuff. So that's been a great change for us. And I think for her to feel like, I try to make her, she is the leader of a national student housing company. It just happens to be within the Dinerstein Companies.
Which is amazing.
I love it.
I know, I can tell. So I want to talk about how you all have been able to achieve the elite 1%, or of course, you have properties that have made it into that. For student housing, the 2022 top student housing company is huge. And I want you to give a little of your secret sauce in a little bit. But before we do that, COVID has been brought up a few times. Some people still go, why are we talking about it? It has had such a big impact on us personally, professionally, within what we do within our organizations. I'm curious to know if there was anything that you implemented during COVID that you're surprised stuck around or didn't. Can you share a little insight about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, obviously, a lot of us were sick of, to your point, talking about COVID, but it's one of those things that really challenged us across the board to really look at the way we were doing things. And I think there were just across our industry, whether it was student or conventional or multifamily, there were so many great things that wound up coming from the way we were doing things because we were forced to, live in this COVID and, post-COVID world. And we definitely had a lot of trial and error on things we were doing. Some things we kept and some things we didn't. We really, I'll say the big thing for us, and I know a lot of companies did this, but when COVID really started, obviously leasing offices shut down and we had so much remote work happening. We really dipped our toes in the water on virtual leasing and virtual tours and AI, chat bots on your website, different things like that, just to make sure that prospects and residents were still getting tended to, even though our teams may not be available like they once were. And we did that for a long time, and we've pulled back on that since things for us have really returned most of the way back to a, kind of pre-COVID world. We've felt like that for us just didn't make a lot of sense to keep going. We are a people company, we're an experience company, and we really believe in that. And we didn't feel like we were getting that from the, virtual leasing and AI and, chat bots and different things like that on our websites. And so for us, we've really gone full steam ahead on putting our resources back into our leasing offices, into our teams, having them front and center, having them available for residents and prospects. And that's been a big thing. And I know a lot of companies they've gone all in on a lot of those things. But for us, like I said, we're a people company. We really care about the resident experience, obviously. And we felt like we feel the best way to do that is to continue to put all of our efforts into our teams. So that's something we haven't kept. But then we've had a lot of great things that came, from what we've learned from COVID. We have completely changed our move-in experience when it comes to our move-in day for our properties. Everything is completely contactless. You'll come to our property, drive into our parking garage, get your keys, and go to your unit. You no longer have to come into our leasing office. It's very minimal interaction with our team, and we're doing that so that people can just have a more seamless experience in what they're doing. And that's something that will never change at this point. So
yeah, it's interesting how some of the things within COVID has just made us more efficient and better that you were kind of doing at the time out of a need.
Yep.
And then I remember her coming back and she's like, this whole touchless movement is incredible. Like not only was it better for our teams, but it was such a better experience for the parents and the kids getting like all the, like it's all, for us, it's all about the experience and that interaction, but at the right times. At that point, those parents, they just want to get their kids in the units. They don't want to be in that long line. The faster we can get them in and up to the units, the faster they're happy. And instead of like, they've been waiting in line for 2 hours because we're trying to like give them this great experience and walk them up.
Right.
Well, they're angry. Right. Like by then they're hot, so
it's with my son Tristan.
You did. Yeah. And so it's interesting how a lot of, and I'm sure it'd be fun to kind of ask a lot of companies that of like, what changes did you make during COVID that have stayed and what has gone back and what she was talking about from the experience standpoint. I think on the conventional side, maybe there's a little more of a hybrid. On the student side, as you know, as a parent, look, the kids are fine with texting and stuff. As a parent, you want to look somebody in the eye. You want to see who is taking care of your child. You don't want to talk to some AI bot, And so we know that, and so we're leaning, like she said, we're leaning in on back into the experience and making sure that you get that human interaction because it's humans that are taking care of your children, not robots. Well, at least right now, it's not robots.
When we look at the data on the guarantor surveys that we do, the difference in what the students are saying versus what the parents are saying, sometimes there's a huge disconnect. The companies that do well, they're saying the same thing with their satisfaction. But I want to go back quickly to something that you said about leaning in on that experience and that personal touch. And a number of organizations have embraced not having that. They have the centralized leasing or they're leaning so much on virtual, which is not a bad thing to have the option. This is just my personal opinion. there's a reason you all are number one.
Yep.
And I really think part of that is what you just said, everything you just described about leaning in on that experience and bringing your teams back. But even through COVID, you all were number one. You've been number one for 5 years. So you've figured something out.
Right.
I know that you created a position within your organization that was strictly based on the customer, the resident experience. And at the time that you did it, and you'll have to tell me what the title is, it's slipping my mind right now. It seemed like you all were the first ones to pioneer this. Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about that, the thought process and how that came about.
I'll actually let Clay. This was, I think, his maybe brainchild, so.
Don't give him credit.
My baby. Yeah, it's something, and this is part of what was exciting about me coming over and joining the Dinerstein Companies is they're like, Clay, it's a blank slate. You know, it's your show. You build your perfect management company. And so it got me like really thinking about what I wanted to accomplish and stuff. And I happened to be, I wish I could remember the conference. I can see the room. It's kind of one of those deals where like a light bulb moment goes off and I can see the room. I can see the stage. I can see the speaker that happened. And I was at a conference like within the first 4 months that I joined the Dinerstein Companies in January 2015. And the speaker was the vice president of customer experience for Southwest Airlines. And she was talking, all about, what makes Southwest Airlines different. And then she kind of started talking about her role, and her role was solely based on making sure that the customer's experience at Southwest was the best it possibly be. And at the time, they've had a hiccup or so. Like recently, at the time, they've always been known as the best customer experience. And it kind of hit me. I was like, man, that's always been something that was huge to me, is like the experience of the resident. That obviously is everything to the success of a property. And so it made me realize, like, okay, all of our teams, like, they want to give the best customer experience. They want to give everything that they have to give them the best experience, but they have so much other stuff that they have to do that they can't possibly do it. It's like, what if I did that? What if I came up with this position, that one person that was solely focused on that? Like, could that work? And so I kind of been thinking about it, and I went to lunch with a friend, and she brought one of her friends, and her friend was her name's Kelly Hogan, and she sat there and she was like, I hadn't even met her. Like, I didn't even know her, and you know her now. And like, she's sitting, and she's the most engaging person, like, where within a minute you feel like you're her best friend. Like, those people that just draw you in. I mean, I think halfway through, she like reached over and grabbed like some food off my plate and just started eating it and stuff. And it was like, I was just like, this person is crazy, but incredible at the same time. Like, drew you in, like, and I remember a couple weeks later thinking, I was like, that could be the person who is this. And it's a funny story, because I went and met her for coffee, and if you know Kelly, she's married now. Her name's Kelly Wyatt. If you know her, you'll appreciate this. She's the most amazing person, but also maybe the biggest klutz you've ever met too, which all goes with her personality. And at her kind of interview, we were having coffee, and she was real animated, wanting to show me how great what she was. She goes, boom, and knocked her coffee, huge coffee, across the table, all spilling in my lap. And she was just like froze, staring at me. And I go, what are you doing? Go get some napkins or something, And so we still actually go back to that coffee shop once a year on that anniversary, just to celebrate no coffee spilling. But so she came on, and she was so excited about this position. She had never thought about that being a position before, and just embraced it, and was like, and all we did was kind of brainstorm. This is when we were a lot smaller, and we can control that. I would say that's part of the secret to our success. Is this is when we were a quarter of the size we are now. And so I was really fortunate in being able to like really roll out this customer experience model. We read a bunch of books, and we found this one book called 212 Degrees of Service that I think a lot of people know. And what really stood out to me on that one was you read so many customer experience books, and they're 300 pages, and it could have been 20 pages just to say what they got across. That 212 degrees of service is short, to the point. Each page is like a couple sentences that like really make you think. And I was like, okay, there's something to this, that people will actually read it, and that may actually kind of like implement some of the stuff. So we started kind of rolling that out. Again, we were small at the time, and so we could like just bear hug all these properties with what our customer experience vision and model was, and get them to really buy in and control that. And then from there, you can kind of grow that. And as you bring on new people, you're putting them through that same feel. And director of customer experience, we call her DOCE, D-O-C-E. And she goes out and has a DOCE experience with every property to really onboard them and really let them know, like, this is who we are. We are different. And every company says they concentrate on the customer experience, but like, it starts from the top and it's all the way down. And as a leader of the company, you try to roll out initiatives all the time, and some stick and some don't. I mean, it's one of the most prideful professional moments in my life to like roll this passion of mine out and just see it just catch fire. And now people talk about our customer experience and 212 service just as they're in their daily lives, and they celebrate it. And we have all types of, different awards, and, like, what is it? What gets recognized gets repeated. I mean, we recognize customer experience and customer service almost above anything else, because if that's getting done, everything else will take care of itself. And so it just caught fire, and the next thing we know, people start wanting to share that online. And we're like, oh my gosh, like, it's amazing how if you do the right thing, you take care of it, people want to say how great they are. They want to, if people have great experiences, maybe they will. If they have a great experience with a person who is actually knows them, has developed a relationship, they want to go, laud that person online and tell people how great it is. So you just saw it kind of organically. It then kind of started improving our online reputation. It all just kind of took off. And the next thing we knew, we were number one in the country in student housing. And it takes a lot it's a lot of hard work. Things have to go your way with properties, in student housing, like you said, deliveries have to be on time. We've been fortunate in that we've had a lot of good deliveries. We've had some tough ones too, but it's about how we handle it during the hard times too. That I think we can have some really hard deliveries, but if we're treating the people the right way and they see that, they can still give you a positive review, even if they moved into a property that still had some missing furniture or something. But if we take care of them, they'll still see what we're all about and the experience we're all about. So it's pretty exciting. I mean, I told Aryne, to be 5 years in a row, to be back to back, I couldn't believe. Mm-hmm. But to be 5 years in a row is like surreal. And I said this the other day, it's like, I don't want us to get used to this. Like, I want us to like keep feeling that fire, to keep wanting to stay there and show that, we have what I think is the best customer experience model in the business.
Well, it's interesting that you say fire, because for those that don't know, that are listening, the 212 principle, that's something, this is just a side note. So why I'm over here so excited about it, I actually bought the program years ago after my husband went through the 212. And it was the 212 itself, not the 212 service portion. And I fell in love with it, Clay. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I bought all 3 books, and then I paid to get certified so I could teach it. And then I changed it for multifamily, and I actually have a session that I've done for years about that. And you said fire. Well, so the whole thing about 212 is at 211 degrees, water's hot. But at 212, it boils. And with boiling water, you get steam. And in the example of it, steam can power a locomotive. Right. So you think about that one extra degree of service that you're giving is literally not giving away everything, but it is literally going into it with the mindset and the culture that you all have created and instilled in your team members that they matter first. So if they know that, and then giving that to the residents because of how much they matter, I mean, that right there, as simple as it is in its foundation, that fire that you have powers the steam so that your team members can provide that excellent service. Like, it all comes full circle. And I was just over here going, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. It truly is that, because it takes that extra. Yes. You might not deliver in the way you anticipated, but it's how you handle that. You mentioned Southwest Airlines a while ago, and they have had some really big mistakes. I received a letter, you probably did too if you fly by them, and that letter was one of the best, most well-written. Okay, I know that they had somebody help them with it. It was so well written about owning up to the mistakes that they had made. It was honest. It said, we're still working through these. We're still failing here, but this is what we're putting into place to make sure that this doesn't happen. We actually knew this was a problem. We had money set aside. We had not implemented that. That's our bad. Here's what we're doing moving forward, and here's what you can expect. We're sorry we let you down. And so in those moments, and just by the things that you have said, it allows me to know that you all truly do get it. And it's that fire, it's that steam, it's that extra thing that you can do, whether it's a challenge and opportunity to improve, or you're just doing your job. And it's not like it's a job. Like, your team members have a passion for what they do, and they take it to that next level. They do the 212. And I think right there is a huge reason that you all have been able to achieve that, and making sure people first, not a bot. Yep. Not a virtual's there. They have the ability to see what they need to see. And, we think about the kids. They do like texting, but when something's wrong, they like to know it's going to be okay. They like to know mom or dad is going to be able to talk to somebody, or if they want to go there themselves, they like that face-to-face, and you're providing that.
And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show emotion and figure out, what they're feeling so that you can solve the problem. I think so many, and we even see this at our properties and stuff as we bring people on. They get trained so used to following the rules that you forget about what's best for the child and what's best for the parent. And we had it even recently with one of our portfolio directors. He was doing the right thing. He was making decision, kind of holding his ground, because that's what the rule was based on the lease on this parent. And I still remember John Barr, who does a lot of our lease ups, he came into the office. He goes, I was like, why am I just holding that line just to hold the line? I was like, we can give this parent this little thing that they're asking for, and it'll make their day. And he's like, I'm going to do that right now. And he went and called the parent, and the parent was so happy that even though they wouldn't and the parent knew that they were in the wrong, but we're like, it's not going to hurt us. It's going to give them what they're looking for their child, and then end up they give a positive review because we worked with them and helped them. And I think that is one key, is just making sure that you're not just following the rules just to follow the rules versus really what's best. And that's something that we really preach. And what's great about our company, I think, is everybody knows kind of the Ritz-Carlton method of giving, giving some decision making to your on-site teams. We try to do that to a point, obviously, but it's all about the resident and customer experience, and not just following the rules.
And also for us, hiring the right people.
Oh yes,
just from the beginning, we go into every situation. You may not have the most experience, and that's okay. We can work with you and we can teach you, but we're looking for nice people. We're all about just, are you a nice person? Or are you a good person? Great, you'll thrive with us.
And here's what we believe in, starting from the interview process. In fact, we've really stopped resume hiring as much as we can, and we're just we know that we are really good teachers. We can teach you how to do the job. We can't teach you how to be a good person. And so if we can hire great people with a great work ethic, we'll spend the time investing in you to make you better. And one, that makes a great employee. Two, what we've seen is it's also created long-term employees, because if we invest in them, they'll invest in us.
100%.
Absolutely.
So speaking of long-term, Somebody told me that Dinerstein is getting into the build to rent arena. Is that true?
It's true. It's the flavor of the year, right? It's
So maybe not so long-term, we'll see.
It's what a lot of developers are doing right now. I can't say we're the pioneers like we were in student housing, but we have seen a need in that. And it's funny, talking about being a parent and having some real world examples of why student housing works and stuff. We were tossing around the idea of BTR, and I still remember Aryne was like, my mom would move in a heartbeat into a BTR. Like her mom lives in an apartment that we manage right now, and she was like, my mom would move in a BTR tomorrow. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, let me go talk to her. And she got all the feedback, and we're like, God, that really does make sense that people that are renters by choice, but they want the home lifestyle of having kind of their own place with a yard and stuff, but then not having to have the upkeep of it, but then still having the fitness center and the pool and all that. I mean, it makes complete sense. It's it's harder to do because you obviously like they're calling it horizontal apartments, or have you heard that term for it? Which means you got to have more land. Well, more land means you got to go outside the city and find some land that makes sense. So we're doing one out near Sienna Plantation area right now. We're working on one in Fort Worth. We're working on a couple in the Orlando area near some retirement communities out there that we think makes sense. And so, look, we're kind of learning it as we go. I mean, I don't want to be naive like I was going into student housing and say, rentals are rentals, because it's not. I mean, it's very different. And talking to some friends that are already doing it, they're learning right now and saying how different it is. But I'm excited. That's something that I always tell our team is it's one of the most exciting things that we love about working at Dinerstein is Brian Dinerstein has this incredible mind and vision, and he's always looking for, what's the next thing to do. And one day he'll walk in and say, we're looking at a company to buy right now. It's 20 properties across 4 states, and we're all like, oh, all right, well, let's figure out how we could do that, And the next day they'll walk in and say, we're looking at this incredible deal across the street from Wrigley Field. Like I was in Chicago yesterday, and I'd never been to Wrigley Field, and to look at this deal that we're looking at across the street from Wrigley Field, that you're looking on the home plate, incredible. Or doing the nicest student high rise, I think one of the nicest student high rises in America in Tucson or San Marcos or College Station, to now, doing BTR. I mean, it's really fun because you never know what's coming next. And that's what I tell them. I said, all you need to know here is you don't know what's coming next, just be ready. And so that's where we really try to have our teams, we're always trying to train for the next, if it's my goal, it's actually on my goal sheet every year, is to promote from within if at all possible. My real goal is to only hire from the outside if I'm trying to gain knowledge. So somebody that could come in and help us gain knowledge. Outside of that, I want to have a company that we're growing people and growing within our company.
It's funny you say that on the BTR. That's not the story I thought you were going to tell about me. I mean, that's fine.
No, tell me
the real. What I thought you were going to say was that when we started talking about BTR internally, my first comment was, well, that's student. We've already been doing that. We've been doing BTR with cottages and, all of these properties for 15 years at this point. So it's really cool just to see the evolution of BTR and, moving into this. Like you did say, my mom would be a perfect BTR candidate and would absolutely love it. So it's really neat to see that we're going to take this kind of new journey. But I do think we have some kind of institutional knowledge there already because, Dinerstein has developed cottages before and we've done this. So it's exciting to see and exciting to see us grow.
And ironically, Mindy, speaking of that, that's a really good point of people doing the cottage type properties. They're in student. In San Antonio and some other markets, but San Antonio's on top of mine, is you actually have conventional owners who are going in and buying student cottage-built properties and converting them to conventional. A group did that last year, and we just found another group is doing it again, where they're going to kind of lease down the student side and they're turning it into conventional BTR because they're in good, you think about like UTSA, even just being around UTSA is still a great location for San Antonio. So it's interesting how they're even kind of using the old student quote BTRs and making them new BTRs.
Well, I think we're going to have to do another one of these when you have a little more traditional, what we call BTR. Who knows what that looks like, though? I got you sitting on a panel for NAA that we're going to be talking about the differences of student conventional and BTR and
Maybe
SFR.
I'll know more about BTR
by then. I know, in June. So definitely, if you're coming to the National Apartment Association's Education Conference, you'll want to sit in on that. You're doing that for the supplier partners. Right. But half the time, it's owner-operators that sit in there, too. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I love that idea of those educating the supplier partners on that, because I don't know that they really get to sit in those type of educational type sessions very often. So it's a great idea.
Yes. Well, you two have been absolutely amazing. I think without even just saying point 1, point 2, point 3, this is how we've achieved being number one over the past 5 years. There were so many nuggets of amazing information that if I was still on the owner-operator side, working in student and conventional, I would be taking a page out of your playbook 100%. There is a little secret sauce to it that you all know that's special about the Dinerstein Companies. But then there's also just being a kind human and being smart and treating people the way they want to be treated.
It's pretty simple.
Right.
And then honestly, I will say this at the end, is like, I used to be super, cautious of sharing our secret sauce. It's not secret. I mean, everybody knows like how you do it. You're right. You hire great people and you treat people right. I mean,
that shouldn't be a secret.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not a secret, right? Isn't that the golden rule maybe that's been around forever? So it makes it easier to talk it out because everybody knows it. It's just figuring out how to do it.
Well, congratulations again on being number one.
Thank you.
Yes, really proud of you all. And
yes, we are.
You should be celebrating. We should all be celebrating for sure. And I just have to say, being a friend and going back as far as we do, I'm so proud of you. You're an amazing leader. Way to go. And he speaks so highly of you. And I haven't had too many interactions, but the proof's in the pudding, as my mom likes to say, and it's definitely there. So it has been an absolute pleasure to have the two of you on. Thank you so much for joining this episode of the Multifamily Leaders Podcast. And a super special thank you to Clay and to Aryne for being here. You all are amazing. You've been great guests. You shared some really incredible tips, I think, for how you got to number one 5 years in a row. Once again, congratulations. Student Housing's 2022 top company. Way to go.